The USA Today, they asked the question of many readers. They said, if you could have a direct line to God and you could literally ask God one question, what would that question be? And the largest group of answer was 1/3 of all of the people said, what is my purpose here? So if we can help people find purpose, we're going to do very well. These are universal desires that we all have. They are goodness, truth, beauty, unity, love, home. If everybody wants that, then you can motivate people because they have a desire for goodness. They have a desire for beauty, and they have a desire for truth. So if you have an organization and you lead people and you tell them the truth, and they know that the more truth they have, the more they're going to get, the more they're attracted to the circumstance.
Welcome to Duran on Demand. I'm back with the host, Dave Duran, and we have been planning some seminars here, Dave, and we got a list of really cool questions and topics that we'll cover today for our Duran on Demand episode. But before we do, Dave, you just came back from a honeymoon. How are you feeling?
I just can't, awesome. It was great. I found the woman of my dreams. We walked down the aisle, exchanged vows, had a great honeymoon, and we are off to the adventure of life together, and it's just amazing.
And by the way, I did attend the wedding. I was fortunate to be one of the guests, and it was an incredible wedding. We even sang Dragon Slayer together.
And I wasn't going to, but you sang. We had so many people that requested, because Nico is the voice behind Dragon Slayer. Would he perform it? So he did, and then kind of spontaneously he tossed me a microphone, and we both started jamming together. It was so much fun.
Yeah, I would say it would be the alley-oop, but really you came in as the lifesaver because I was forgetting my lyrics, and I'm like, he's mouthing them better than I am.
That was so funny because I had colleagues that were there who are, friends, obviously, who I've known for many years. And one of them said, Dave, the last thing I expected ever to see in my life is you singing and dancing. What is going on? And it is funny because when you think about that, those are two things that I really enjoy doing. Now, I'm a horrible singer, so the idea that I would actually sing is a hilarious idea. There are some songs that I can sing, but for the most part, that's not something I'm going to publicly do. But I love to dance. And in fact, just started an acting career.
Yeah,
which is hilarious.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, not to diverge too much from the topics at hand. But so you also, the week of your wedding, flew to go shoot a movie with who was involved? Let me ask you the question here.
So, as you know, and some of our listeners do, I've been recently, over the past couple of years, getting a little bit more involved in Hollywood and films and whatnot, mostly on the producer side, a little bit on the creative side, on the writing side, the storytelling side. But through some of those relationships, I was asked to do some acting. I've been taking some acting lessons. But James Franco and Tommy Lee Jones are the two main stars. This is Damien Lichtenstein is the director of the film, great guy. And so I had never acted in a film. We do a lot of things that have kind of an acting element to them, but I've never acted in a film. And I never met James Franco until I was a police officer in the scene, and he's kind of a good bad guy. And I pull up to him, and the first words I ever said to James Franco weren't, "Oh, hi, nice to meet you. We're going to do this film." And I have a very small, very, very, very small role in this. But I interact with him acting for the first time ever, which was really a surreal moment and a lot of fun.
But that's a really cool, segue into getting married, the biggest, moment of your life. Having kind of this blossoming acting career and getting
I don't know if I'd call it a blossoming acting career. Whether it turns into something else is only to be seen. I didn't really do it with aspirations of being some sort of budding actor. I'm busy doing so many other things. But you know what I love about acting? It's hard. That's why I like it. Because it challenges you in a different way that you're challenged to do other things. So it was kind of a nice little blend in that regard. But it's been a big summer. My son, as you know, got married 2 weeks before my wedding. My other son was ordained a priest 1 month before that. I have everybody's saying it's going to be a granddaughter. I don't know if it's a granddaughter or a son, being born in August. My other son graduated from university. getting married. So many different things going on. And you know this, 2 books coming out in the same year. Whatever, 150 short videos and long form podcasts that we've done now since we launched when did we launch? We launched in February.
February, yeah.
February now, and I think close to 115,000 subscribers, something like that.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
3.5 million views or something. So it's been an incredible year and a lot of fun, Nico, with you getting this stuff done, and we're just getting started.
Yeah, I agree. Well, kind of, segueing into our topics here today, Dave, I know because of the fact that we have been working in the background amidst your busy schedule on these seminars and just kind of, providing support for not just the small business owners, the medium-sized business owners, but also those who are just looking to have an adventure in their life, having some sort of purpose and meaning, right? And so we cover a lot of that here at Leading Giants, and so we're going to go ahead and dive into some of these topics here today. But Dave, one of the things that I would say makes you different than anybody else that I've seen or heard is that you focus on the transcendentals. So, specifically on the transcendentals, what are the roles of the transcendentals in leadership, those being truth, beauty, and goodness?
So there's a couple of different things that I think are super important to tie together as I pull this into the answer. I remember when I was a young guy and I was in business and I was leading a team of people and I needed to motivate them. And I asked another senior person, how do you motivate your team? And he said, you have to hit their hot buttons. And I remember, well, what does that mean, their hot buttons? Well, if they're motivated by a vacation, remind them of the vacation so they can work hard to earn the opportunity to go on this vacation. If they're motivated by a car, whatever it is, all these superficial type of things. And I remember trying that sort of thing, but it was like whack-a-mole, really. And even if a person was kind of excited about one thing in one moment, they might not be the next time. So I thought, well, there's got to be something more here to human nature. And I really went on this wild adventure. And that is a huge key thing, by the way. If people don't recognize that their life is an adventure, then they're really missing the entire point of what it means to live. I mean, you've heard me say this before, but the story never sold. The story that was, even if it was written, would never be read by more than a person once, okay, and never talked about, never made into a film, is a story about the rich kid who was raised by rich parents who were all very healthy, who ran this great business and had lots of prosperity and all sorts of good fortune and friends, who parents die, holding hands at 100 years old, quietly and peacefully in bed while the children take over the business and repeat that same process. It's boring. But people love the story of adventure where there's the protagonist and the antagonist, where there's dimension, where there's turmoil, where there's trouble, where there's love, where there's passion, where there's sacrifice. So that's what our lives are. There's not a single person in life that doesn't have. In fact, the greater you are in life, the more enemies you're going to make, not because you're doing bad things necessarily, although there are some people who make enemies for that reason. But when you do good things, you're going to make enemies because there are many people who hate goodness and they are just going to attack it in every way they can for all sorts of motives that are limitless to name. And so I thought, okay, well, if everybody's life is an adventure, then how do we look at the common things that inspire us to move into that adventure with enthusiasm and with grace and with excitement? And then I started to realize that there are universal things that people want. In fact, the USA Today, this goes back now probably decades, but they asked the question of many readers. They said, if you could have a direct line to God and you could literally ask God one question, what would that question be? And the largest group of answer was 1/3 of all of the people said, what is my purpose here? That's what they would ask God. What is my purpose here? So people want to know their purpose. They want to find purpose. So if we can help people find purpose, we're going to do very well. Ultimately speaking, there are these things called the transcendentals. Now, the way that you actually live out the transcendentals is through virtue, okay? Or the way that I should say that you can actually accomplish the desire of the transcendentals is through virtuous behaviors. But what does this mean? First of all, there are transcendental things. There are universal desires that we all have. They are goodness, truth, beauty, unity, love, home. Now, goodness, truth, unity, and beauty, goodness, truth, and beauty really are the three primary ones that people talk about. But there are a few other ones that are universal. We all want this universal sense of home. We all want to be loved. And, and so they're really important things. But if you look at goodness, truth, and beauty, if everybody wants that, then you can motivate people because they have a desire for goodness, they have a desire for beauty, and they have a desire for truth. So if you have an organization and you lead people and you tell them the truth, and they know that the more truth they have, the more they're going to get, the more they're attracted to the circumstance. In fact, I was just watching a documentary on Phil Heath. Do you know who that is?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, he was Mr. Universe 7 times, and 2 times one time he took second place. He was injured 3 weeks before the event, or he would have won 8 times, okay? But he took third his first time there. Then he takes first for 7 years. Then he takes second because of an injury. He comes back 2 years later, and he takes third again. And he was talking about some of the challenges and struggles that he went through in his life. And he was a very hopeful NBA player. In fact, there's some cool pictures of him because I think he's only 5'10". Wow. But he's Mr. Universe. I mean, the guy is massive. Picture Arnold Schwarzenegger, but thicker because he's not quite as tall, right? And he could dunk a basketball.
That's crazy.
And you see this picture of this guy who looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but only 5'10". Arnold was much taller, dunking a basketball. It's a fantastic image. It's almost like this Atlas type of image, but a basketball. Anyway, I digress. He had hopes of playing in the NBA. Now, he wasn't big like this when he was in college, but he was very fit. And between his freshman and sophomore year, he was injured, he wasn't playing much, and he really didn't like his coach. His coach was eventually fired and apparently a manipulator in whatever ways, just according to his own word in the documentary. But the new coach comes in and says, here's the thing. I don't know how much you're going to play or not, but what I need you to do is I need you to lead these younger players. And this is the program. This is how it's going to work. This is what you're going to get out of it. These are the demands that I have. And if you can accept those, there's going to be a spot for you here. If not, then this is just what you're going to get. And he said he loved it. He said because he was honest. He could tell. This was a coach who really actually cared about me. He asked the key question. He goes, what is your goal in life? What do you want in life? Not just in basketball, but beyond that, because I can help you get that through basketball. So again, these types of stories that come in for even people who, at that time, he was not Phil Heath, who everybody knew.
So Dave, we were talking about Phil Heath here, and you actually had to step out real quick for very much involved in Best Version Media, by the way.
Yeah.
So you're still having to do the ins and outs of motivating the team.
Getting to do
that, which is a huge blessing. But so picking.
And by the way, just for the record, there are so many other tremendous motivators there in the company that I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. But actually, I say that because we recently got a comment from someone who apparently joined Best Version Media, and they were like, "Man, I was so looking forward to being with Dave when joining Best Version Media." I'm like, he's still very much a part of Best Version Media. He hops on the conference calls, and he's definitely there. So be on the lookout for that. So Phil Heath, Dave, we were talking about kind of his journey and a little bit about what that journey entailed. Care to kind of pick it back up?
Yeah, so, before he was the big guy that he was, not only literally, but, in presence because of what he accomplished, he needed to be shaped. He needed to learn certain things mentally in order to get there. And one of those things that he needed to learn was this positive attitude. Now, you've heard me many times criticize just the positive attitude crowd. And I always say this, listen, if you think a positive attitude is the key to success, you're misled. And I always test people. I say, how many of you know a positive person who's a failure? Everyone raises their hand. I say, how many of you know people who are negative or seemingly negative and are successful? And they raise their hand. So if the universal key to success were a positive attitude, that couldn't possibly be the case. So I want people to understand what role does a positive attitude play, because you should really, really capture it. What role does a negative attitude play? But let's take this into a deeper concept. It's not just, I fell down, I got up again, and I saw the sign. I mean, there's actual real psychology and science behind why a positive attitude or how you can use a positive attitude to be successful, as opposed to just having a positive attitude but not being successful. Okay, let's get into what that is. So we talked about the universal desires, goodness, truth, and beauty. I talked about that moments ago. How do they interplay with a positive attitude? I remember one time being around a particular person quite often. The proximity in where I was in life was frequent. And she had gone through a divorce and was very bitter in many different ways. And if she saw a young, beautiful family intact, husband and wife, young kids, in a public place that normally would make everyone just smile because they're so adorable, she would just be angered by it. She would have a negative comment and just didn't like it. Now, here is something that was good and beautiful, and she didn't like it. It actually moved her in the wrong direction. Then I've been around many, thankfully, people who've gone through the same sort of turmoil and tragedy and divorce, who they see that happy little family, and they're joy-filled. They see something that they might even silently say a prayer to hope that this continues for that particular family. They don't face the tragedy they did themselves in divorce. And so why is this important? Because we build ruts in our mind that affect the way that we produce outcomes when it comes to success or failure. So you can imagine like a tractor or a truck driving through a muddy field in a storm, and now the sun comes out and it bakes it, and it's just 100 and some degrees of hot, dry heat, and you have these ruts. And if you were to try to drive a car or another smaller truck through those ruts, you wouldn't be able to turn off those ruts because they're so deep. You're in a path. When we have consistent negative opinions or thoughts, that's what we start to do. And we do two different things. We start to now not have an attraction to what is good and true and beautiful. We actually start to not like it. We have an attraction to things that are bad for us. And we know this to be true on a physical level, where there are people who just absolutely crave fast food and, potato chips and carbohydrates and high sugars and all these different things that are bad for them. And what's really interesting about it is that these things are killing them. They're literally killing the person, but they crave what kills them. They in fact, and here's a really interesting part about this, psychologically as well as like in practical sense. Physically speaking, they will not feel good if they don't eat them. They actually have to consume them in the short term. So they are literally, they need to eat something that is killing them in order to feel better before they feel ultimately worse. That is really an interesting thing. So we do that when we go back to social media, and now in this political climate that we are, whether a person's on the left or the right or the center people are just confused. The people on the left are angry at the right, people on the right are angry at the left. Justifiably so, whatever. Yeah, I don't mind playing that card. I just, whoa, wacky at this point. DEI, every unfair thing, the killing of the unborn. I mean, literally every single thing that they stand for, which is ugly, bad, and a lie. But you can even hear me getting like all worked into this, right? So I fast on this so that I don't fixate on it regularly, so that I give myself 15 minutes of getting caught up and hearing the same thing over and over again, so you don't constantly have to go through this. But the whole point would be that how can you be positive in a negative world? So if you have the ability to be joy-filled in the midst of this political environment, even though you're aware of people say there's two choices for that. Just bury your head in the sand. Because if you're aware of what's going on, you're going to be negative. No. There's a better option. And it is to be aware and to be filled with joy anyway. Be filled with happiness and to live a great life in the midst of all these dangerous, threats to our civilization. That's another one that always cracks me up, by the way, that the left is somehow trying to preserve our democracy. That is the biggest lie I have ever heard in my life. They're literally trying to take our freedom and our democracy away. And you have to be a tiny little brained person to believe that lie. But I suppose if you're an echo chamber and all you do is watch CNN and MSNBC and talk to your friends who believe these same unhappy lies, then yeah. But anyway, so that's just a separate part to it. You can actually be happy though even being aware of all of these things and all of these lies. And for entrepreneurs, this is an important thing, or people in sales, or people in business, or people in leadership, or people in coaching or parenting. You're going to be experiencing negative things all the time. I mean, on a regular basis. Leadership is like being stoned to death by popcorn. You know, you don't walk into your office and have people say, hey, Dave, just want to let you know all these great things that are happening right now. Oh, and by the way, great, love your shirt. That's not what's happening. They come in and go, there's a problem. There's a problem. There's a problem. The reason you have a job is to be a problem solver. And then, no matter what job you have, it's solving a problem. So you come into that and you have to solve the problem. And that sounds negative. Why are all these problems here? Why are they doing it like that again? How can everybody be so stupid that they have this problem here and here and here? By the way, just back to the political thing. There are some generals in this who absolutely know they're trying to destroy the country and take it over. And they're relying on the naivete or the good-heartedness of a person who is very easily manipulated into believing that this destructive thing that they're doing is actually good. But then there are many people who are just not giving it any thought, and they're in there. So if you think of everyone as a general, they're all out to destroy the country and the world and blah, 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 you're going to be very negative. But if you realize that there are some people who are doing that, and the rest of the people are actually really good-hearted people who have just been misled, you would believe what they believe. If you had been fed what they've fed, probably acted the same way. So here what you have is an opportunity to influence somebody for the better who is a good person who needs to make a change, right? So if you look at it that way, it's very different. Likewise, if you're in your role, your leadership role, and all these problems come by, you say, this is why I have my job. This is literally, I would be out of job if we solved every one of these problems. Ironically, though, you still have to try to solve them. And if you can solve them and put yourself out of work, it usually means that you've been promoted because you're a problem solver and people want you at a higher level of decision making. But this is another way of saying that now the more you repeat the negative thoughts in relationships. I went through divorce, therefore I hate intact families. They make me jealous. Okay. At my work, so-and-so got a promotion and I didn't. Therefore, anybody who gets a promotion when I didn't, it makes me angry and I deserve it and they didn't. You begin to look at every single circumstance from the lens of cynicism, and that puts you in a greater victim mentality. And now you can't actually find success because the way you look at things is in these deep ruts that are ingrained, and you have to pull yourself out of that. So how do we do it? I can tell you how in a reverse way before I tell you. There are a lot of people who have a pretty good amount of success in their field, but they're not a hyper performer, like a super elite performer. Well, why is it? Well, in sales, for example, maybe they're good at presenting, creating a problem that needs to be solved, or identifying a problem that they're there to solve, getting the customer to feel that pain in a reasonable way, providing a good articulation to the solution of that, and being able to guide that person in the right way to signing a contract or buying. They're very, very good at that. And they're good at understanding the product. They have product knowledge, all these things that most people go, wow, this person, they're just great at their job. Yeah, but what if they're only doing 40% or 30% of the number of appointments that they should do in the first place? Here's a huge gap. If you were to talk to that person about that gap, and they would be negative about it. In almost every instance, they say, oh, I'm positive about all these things that I'm good at. Well, what about doing more appointments? I don't need to do that. That's stupid. In fact, even the fact that they tell me I should do more, in fact, I wouldn't do as well as I do if I did that. And they have all these negative justifications on that. So even though they found success and they've got good thought patterns in most areas that they're doing, they're holding a few other ones out there. And this is the complexity of human nature, is that most of us are not all good and all bad, not always positive or always negative. But we have these certain areas in life that show up to remind us how human we are. So what happens is, let's say you've got a person that's really good at appointments, but they're not very good at closing. And you say, hey, you need to learn how to close better. Well, and now they get negative about, well, the way the company closes a sale isn't moral. So sometimes they'll say that, even though it has nothing to do with morality. But usually when people try to attack somebody else's lack of morality, they're doing it because it's a very hard argument against them. In other words, are you trying to tell me that you want me to be immoral like they are? So if a naive person hears that argument, they are subject to just backing off pretty quickly. It's a pretty good stiff arm. Okay, the wise leader looks at them and says, you're talking about something that is not moral or immoral, actually tactical and good and effective. If you were to actually place a moral judgment on it, it's a good moral judgment because you're helping a customer by identifying questions that they have in order to guide them to want to buy something that they need. Now, if those things aren't true, by the way, because it's a bad product and you are not actually providing that, maybe it is immoral. I mean, there have been immoral closes out there. In fact, many. But the point would be, just hearing those words doesn't make it that way. And so where is the negativity? So the reason that I say that is because a person who is experiencing a lot of failure in life, who doesn't have very many friends, because this is what happens. If you're a negative person thinking negative thoughts on a regular basis, you now start to not have resolve. And resolve is the real key to success more than a positive or negative attitude. Because a negative attitude creates a victim mentality. And a victim mentality is something that says, I don't have self-agency. I'm relying on other people to make me successful, not my own merit. And you can't have success that way. So what do? You get negative, and you talk about how everybody else is bad, and nobody wants to be around you. Literally, you wake up and you turn everyone off. So you can imagine if you wake up, and when you wake up on any given day, nobody likes you. You don't have friends. Well, now you really seem to be like this in manifest destiny, right? Where you're saying to yourself, all these things that I believe about people are proven to be true on a daily basis because look at how everybody is a jerk and nobody likes me. And then you get stuck in this pattern. So if you are a person that is like heavily in the pattern of negativity, heavily in the pattern of low performance, I want you to know that you probably have a mirror image or checkerboard image of the person who's highly successful in sales, but they're just not doing enough appointments. There's that one thing they're missing. Or the other person doing a lot of appointments, doing everything else right, but they're just not closing. There is something in your life you're positive about. There is something. Take whatever that thing is and start to examine the pattern within it in order to get through it. So using Phil Heath again as an example. It was fascinating watching him study bodybuilding. If you looked at him in high school or even in college, he was fit, and probably people would have walked up to him and said, "Hey, Phil, you're jacked." But he was not Mr. Olympia looking kind of guy at all. And he just decided to get into bodybuilding and go into this intense diet and lifting and to study it. And he didn't get to a place where he was like, "Oh, there's a part of my back that needs to be developed. I'm not going to win. This particular opponent that I have, he just has a bigger back, naturally bigger back, therefore I lose." Most people look at it that way. They're like, well, I'm not naturally strong. I'm not naturally tenacious. I'm not naturally motivated, or I have a bad knee. And they label themselves in these ways that these other really great elite athletes don't do. They attack it. They literally say, where's the pain? I'm going to attack it. Where's the weakness? I'm going to build that into a strength. And they go after that. And I would say that probably the biggest separator between somebody who has super high levels of success and people that don't are the ones that buy the lie that they've already reached their limit. Okay? Now, some people do reach their limit. That's an actual real thing. But usually it's only their limit in one place. And you can now enhance other areas in order to do things. Or use bodybuilding example, maybe their chest is so unbelievably massive that it's pulling on other body parts and it's causing damage in other places. So yeah, you should kind of keep your chest at that level and get the other muscles to catch up to it, right? So being at capacity for your chest, at least at that current form, is not a bad thing. It's just a good target for the rest of the muscles to catch up to until they're all even, and now you can start building again, So we have to look at these things and say, how do we see the circumstances that we're in and recognize the thought patterns that we have that are negative, that keep us there and perpetuate further negativity, and then identify the ones that are not like that can free us and take us to the next level.
We covered a lot of ground here, Dave. I think this was a good opening topic for what would be kind of just this series of micro seminars, so to speak, on the podcast form. And of course, we'll develop these further for the actual seminars that we'll be doing within Leading Giants. So make sure to tune in next week for the next topic here on Durand On Demand. And if you're new here, welcome. we have a Leading Giants program that will walk you through everything from effective leadership to personal development and more. I invite you to check that out on leadinggiants.com and stay tuned for more on that as well. So until next time, thanks so much.